Hi there, I'm the Reverend Danny Crosby, a Unitarian minister serving congregations in Altrincham and in Urmston in the northwest of England. And I offer this devotion as a balm for the heart, for the mind, for the spirit, and for the soul. And it's titled Clues, the thread you follow through life's labyrinth. And I'm going to begin with a short poem, I'm not quite sure what it is really, by Kayla Parker, entitled Labyrinth. Walk the maze within your heart. Guide your steps into its questioning curves. This labyrinth is a puzzle leading you deeper into your own truths. Listen in the twists and turns. Listen in the openness within all searching. Listen. A wisdom within you calls to a wisdom beyond you, and in that dialogue lies peace. And in that dialogue lies peace. It's been quite a week. It's been a busy week. I have been very much involved right into the stream of life. And whilst I've been swimming in the stream, I felt as though the ears of my ears have been wide awake and the eyes of my eyes wide open. It has felt as if the soul of life has been communicating with my life, but gently and persistently. That wisdom beyond, and lies that dialogue of peace, and I felt that dialogue speaking to me. It's been quite a week. I've conducted 2 funerals in the chapel this week. Both were of friends of mine, friends for many, many years. One of whom became a much loved member of the Dunham Road congregation, Liz. The other I've known through fellowship. Both funerals had moments, unexpected moments, that have awakened something in me and awakened something in others, something speaking from that deeper soul. At Monday at John's funeral, those in attendance were invited to speak after I'd shared the eulogy. Several did beautifully about his life and what John had meant to them. And then a man came forward who it seemed no one else knew. I'd seen him as he came to the service and he looked quite distressed, but he came forward and he began to speak, and we all listened. He took out his phone and I could see that there was a picture on his phone of a letter that he'd written to John over 20 years before. The letter was an apology that he'd never been able to give to John for things that had happened when they were kids, when they were at school together. He had tried once before, but John wasn't there. As he spoke, you could feel something moving. We could all feel it. And shared beautifully and emotionally. And after he left, none of us really had the chance to speak to him. The service came to an end and we had to go off to bury to do and intern John's ashes. So he left and didn't join us for that or join us afterwards. I hope the man finds peace. And what he shared spoke powerfully to me of the potential for healing and the potential for redemption in our lives, no matter how far down the line it might be. It spoke powerfully to me of faith. And it was an incredible experience to witness. I hope it brought healing to him. It certainly brought healing to me and those that were privileged enough to hear it. Liz's funeral service had a powerful impact too. There were even a couple of moments when it felt like the God of humour was playing tricks on us all. Liz would have loved that. And I was deeply moved by what so many people told me after the service. They said, "You really knew Liz, didn't you?" And I did. they also told me how much she loved the community and how through being a member of the community, it had healed her so much. She will be greatly missed. Something I felt throughout that day, how much she will be greatly missed. Now, following the service, there was a private, intimate committal just with the direct family at Dunham Massey, where we interned John's ashes also. And it was, a moving service, beautiful service. And then it ended with the song, "Hi ho, silver lining, everywhere we go, but better. I see that the sun is shining," and I can't remember the words, but you know the words. And it just seemed a perfect ending, really. And as we stepped out after the service into the sunshine, and it being a dark, rainy morning actually, but the sunshine was bright in Dunham Massey, and I noticed just in the distance, probably somewhere over Carrington Way, the outline of a rainbow in the skyline. I'm not sure anybody else noticed it, but I looked up and saw this. It had been raining for some time that morning, but the sun, hi-oh, silver lining indeed, and just seemed like perfect timing. Now, the very next morning, I attended my usual Thursday morning meditation. Liz herself had actually been one of the 4 people who attended that meditation for the very first time, 12 years ago maybe. She was one of the 4 founding members of that group. 2 of the others, along with myself, the 2 others that were also the founding members of that group, were at her funeral actually, which was so lovely. We shared our silence together, and then immediately after our 10 minutes of silence, when people speak whatever stirs in their hearts, the first person immediately said that he'd been driving to the meeting, the meditation that morning, listening to Talk Sport, which probably isn't the most spiritual thing to listen to in the morning, when suddenly, guess what they began to play? "Hi ho, silver lining, everywhere we go, but better. I see that the sun is shining," etc., etc., etc. What an amazing coincidence, I thought as I listened to the man. Then he shared about being out with his family walking in the hills, how the kids were complaining about the weather and having to walk, his teenage daughters particularly. He talked of a giant seagull pooing on his head and all kinds of things that were just kept going wrong on this walk out in the countryside, trying to get the family to enjoy a country walk. Anyway, they reached the summit of a hill. The sun came out, and then in front of them was a beautiful rainbow, and this sense of gratitude came over him that they could share that moment together. It just took him over. And I thought to myself, hi ho, silver lining indeed. Later, I was sat with a couple of folk who'd been at Liz's funeral and remembered a conversation that I'd had with them that day. It was funny. At the funeral that we'd had at the funeral, just after where we were having food and tea and coffee. One was trying to describe someone that apparently we all knew, but he couldn't remember his name. And he was just doing a terrible, terrible, terrible job of it. And I remarked to John, actually, "Come on, John, give us a clue." Someone said he'd be absolutely useless at charades. He was certainly no Una Stubbs or Lionel Blair, it has to be said. And I think that time together, this conversation where we were just talking about things we couldn't remember, kind of gave me a glimpse of what it might be like if we have the privilege to live long enough to end up in a retirement home. If we have that privilege to live that long. There was joy, there was laughter shared as we remembered dear old friends that we have known along the way of life. Life truly does speak, and those in life speak so much truth when you've got ears that can hear it. There are clues everywhere. All we have to do is pay attention and keep on sharing whatever we have to share with one another, for we sail the ship together. And clues actually have been on my mind of late. You may wonder why. Well, it's in no small part thanks to a recent etymological discovery. I recently learnt the origin of the word clue. It was an amazing and surprising discovery, actually, not what you would think. And its origin is a true adventure in itself, involving Greek mythology, actually. The word clue, as in a piece of evidence used as a guide in solving a mystery or solving a problem, originally meant a ball of thread, spelt, clue was spelt C-L-E-W originally. Now, of course, that raises an interesting question, doesn't it? What on earth has thread got to do with clues? Well, the answer is in Greek mythology in the story of Ariadne, Theseus, the Labyrinth, and the Minotaur. Now, in Greek mythology, the Minotaur was a terrifying creature, half human and half bull, born on the island of Crete. Now, to keep the Minotaur from hurting people, the king of the island of Crete makes Daedalus, who is a great inventor and a great architect, he gets him to create a labyrinth, which the Minotaur is trapped in and will never be able to escape from, so no longer a danger to the people of Crete. Now, one day the king of Crete's son is in Athens and is killed. And the king becomes so incensed with the death of his son that he declares war on Athens. And in the war, the Athenians are defeated. And as a punishment, because the man is so angry and vengeful, as a punishment, they are forced to send 7 girls and 7 boys to Crete every year. And they are forced into the labyrinth, where the Minotaur devours them. It's an horrific tale, isn't it? Well, Theseus, who is the son of the king of Athens, has enough of this, and he's an adventurer and goes through all kinds of battles. He was one of those classic Greek mythological heroes. He decides to go to Crete in order to kill the Minotaur and therefore stop the sacrifices. When Theseus arrives in Crete, he meets Ariadne, who is the king of Crete's daughter, and Ariadne, even though he's a sworn enemy, falls in love with him. Theseus tells Ariadne that he intends to kill the Minotaur and that he will marry her if she helps him. So a romantic tale too. At this point, Ariadne gives Theseus a ball of thread that is called a clue, spelt C-L-E-W in English translation. And Daedalus had given this to her. She tells Theseus that if he keeps hold of the thread, he will find his way back out of the labyrinth through this thread. So Theseus ties one end of the thread at the door of the labyrinth. He manages to find the mighty Minotaur and defeats it in battle and kills the Minotaur while deep down into the depths of the labyrinth. He then follows the thread all the way out of the labyrinth. That's the story, as I'm sure we all know it. It's a very well-known tale. But and that's very interesting, isn't it? You're probably thinking, but it doesn't really answer how that thread came to mean clue, though, does it? Well, the word clue always meant both a ball of thread and something that guides a person out of a difficult or mysterious situation. and the spelling changed from C-L-E-W to the modern C-L-U-E in the 17th century. And so the word that we use today was born and became a clue that we might follow. It's a clue we might follow in order to find an answer to a question or a riddle. So there's the journey. I find that fascinating. I love etymology, and I hope you do too. If you follow my videos, you've got used to these strange adventures that I like to go on. Don't kill monsters, but I like to go on adventures. So if we follow the clues, we will be led out of the labyrinth to safety, no matter how lost we may feel at any times in our lives. We've just got to follow the clues. It's the same about life, isn't it? Certainly my life, if I keep open to the clues, I will always find my way back home. It does not mean we won't face misfortune or even disaster from time to time. We might lose everything. But if we keep hold of the thread, if we take care of our thread, we will always find our way back home. All we have to do is follow the clue. Now, when I think of clues and those who paid attention to clues and followed the clues, what comes to my mind, I don't know about yours, is I think of the great detectives of fiction. And I've always loved detective stories. My dad did, actually. My favourite TV programmes tend to involve mysteries and direction. As a child, I loved to read Agatha Christie, actually, and Dick Francis, but I loved Agatha Christie. And these days, when relaxing of an evening, I love nothing more than watching detective series, whether they're new or old ones. I'm just as happy watching Murder, She Wrote as I am watching any of these high-tech modern series with all the technological stuff. I'm just as happy with a little old lady, really. I'm just as happy watching Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes as I am watching NCIS or and another one in recent years. I love those, the Miss Fisher murder mysteries. Kind of gets the heart going in different ways, but that might be to do with Bryony Fisher, maybe. Shh, we won't go there. But there is something in the searching for clues and searching for answers and coming to conclusions that I suspect is what I really love about these books, these films, these series. And I know I'm not alone. They are as popular now as they have ever been. The great detectives unearth the clues by paying attention, particularly paying attention to the people around them, the suspects, I guess, when it's a murder. And I think the most subtle and seemingly innocent, and they often do, don't they? Think of Columbo, but the greatest, perhaps, is the most seemingly innocent, and it must be Miss Marple, really. She developed a simple, down-to-earth understanding of her people just growing up in the little village of St. Mary Mead, this old lady. She saw through attentive eyes and had an ability to connect the details and stories together and relate them to people she had known her whole life, and it was a long life. She would hear the details of a murder and say something like, "That reminds me of poor old Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so," and how this little problem that they had had or had caused would be related somehow to the murder. Miss Marple paid attention to people. She paid attention to the world around her, and she connected all these things, these clues, together. And I think there's something in this about how we live the spiritual life, in spiritual living. It's about paying attention. It's about making these connections and then putting these connections through paying attention into practical application. The key is not merely to ask questions and search for answers, but to piece it together and then live our lives and come to some kind of our own conclusions with others in this life. The key is to do as Rilke suggested, actually, to live the questions themselves. And in so doing, we may just live our way into the answers. And this is done in our very human lives. It's done by paying attention to one another, paying attention to life around me, paying attention to the voice without and the voice within. This is how we follow the clues in the labyrinth of life. Brings to mind all this paying attention and noticing clues, or not noticing clues actually, this journey through life, and how these things piece together sometimes, and suddenly they all make sense, or suddenly something happens. Brings to mind a favourite poem. It's a kind of love poem story, but it applies, I think, the principles at the heart of it apply just as much to every aspect of life. And the poem is Love at First Sight by Wislawa Szymborska. Great name, isn't it? So this is Love at First Sight by Wislawa Szymborska. They're both convinced that a sudden passion joined them. Such certainty is beautiful, but uncertainty is more beautiful still. Since they've never met before, they're sure that there'd be nothing between them. But what's the word from the streets, staircases, hallways? Perhaps they've passed by each other a million times. I want to ask them if they don't remember a moment face to face in some revolving door. Perhaps a sorry muttered in a crowd, a curt wrong number caught in the receiver. But I know the answer. No, they don't remember. They'd be amazed to hear that chance had been toying with them now for years. Not ready yet to become their destiny, it pushed them close, drove them apart. It barred their path, stifling a laugh, and then leaped aside. There were signs and signals, even if they couldn't read them yet. Perhaps 3 years ago, or just last Tuesday, a certain leaf fluttered from one shoulder to another. Something was dropped and then picked up. Who knows? Maybe the ball that vanished into a childhood's thicket. There were doorknobs and doorbells where one touch had covered another beforehand. Suitcases checked and standing side by side. One night perhaps the same dream grown hazy by the morning. Every beginning is only a sequel after all, and the book of events is always open, halfway through. This beautiful poem, Love at First Sight by Wislawa Szymborska, describes two lovers engaged in a display of public affection. I get the impression that the author is convinced that some guiding force is at work in their interaction. What begins as chance then becomes destiny, which pushed them close, drove them apart. The poem suggests that these lies were scripted long ago in a book of events which cannot be altered, try as we might. The poem suggests that the lovers had passed by one another many times before, but were never aware or ready to make that first point of contact. There were signs along the way that one day this encounter would happen, but it was more than mere chance. Something else was at work, offering itself to both of them. It just took this moment for it to happen. Now, in many ways, I see life much like this these days. So many possibilities are going on all around us. Some possibilities good, others not so good. So many joys, tragedies, triumphs, failures, frustrations, crises, endless possibilities, good and bad. Life offers itself to us, that lure of divine love. But so often we close ourselves off from it. One thing I have noticed is that as I have allowed life itself to guide me, I seem to have become more open. The more open I become to life itself, and the more connected I feel, the more aware I become of experiencing meaning and making meaning-filled decisions. And as I have done so, I've experienced a greater sense of belonging to myself and those people I share my life with. And of course, to this life, this world in which we all live and breathe and share our being. But the more I have lived this way, the more I have noticed the meaningful coincidences in life. Now, some say this is how it's just meant to be. I'm not convinced wholly of that. I prefer to see it as this is how it could be if I allow myself to follow that rhythm of life. If I notice the so-called coincidences, the synchronicities of life, if I follow the thread, if I follow the clues, if I follow those clues everywhere, and all I have to do is pay attention, to be awake. And to follow the clues is to truly live the questions and thus therefore one day hopefully live our way into the answers. This requires us to pay attention to everyone and then to relate it to our own experiences, just like Miss Marple did. Think about it, she followed the clues. To find the answers, she paid attention to life, to other people, to her own intuition. She lived her way into the answers by paying attention. She followed the clues. She followed the thread. I was paying attention on Thursday morning, sitting in meditation. I heard the language of the heart touch me deeply as people spoke. And yet at the same time as they spoke, I could clearly hear the sounds of life going on outside. I could hear the traffic. I could hear the birds singing. I could hear the wind. And as I did, the words that were shared penetrated me more deeply. As I listened, I found the clues and I began to live my way into answers. And what is the answer, you might ask? Well, it's simple, really. The answer is to pay attention. Pay attention to everything. And in so doing, you will begin to live your way into the answers. All you have to do is pay attention. Pay attention to the clues. All you got to do is follow the thread. I'm going to end this devotion with one of my favourite poems by one of my favourite poets, William Stafford. And the poem is The Way It Is. And the poem's about the thread that runs through life, that will guide us home if we follow, just in the same way that Theseus did in the mythos. All we got to do is hold on to the thread. Never let go of the thread. Never let go of the thread. So The Way It Is by William Stafford. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen. People get hurt or die. And you suffer and get old. Nothing you do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. Amen. I'm going to end with some words of blessing, for we need to bless more, and we can all bless. How do we bless? We bless by giving ourselves wholeheartedly to life. And how are we blessed? By paying attention. So may the Spirit of love open our eyes. May it shine light even upon the darkest of days. May we recognise the sacredness of one another, the sacredness of all life, in all time and in all spaces. There are no unsacred places. May we experience the ground at our feet to shake off our shoes, for we are walking on holy ground. All ground is holy. May our mortal human being cultivate extraordinary ordinariness. May we live this blessing. May we bless this life. May we be blessed by it in return. May we follow the clues. May we never let go of the thread. And may we carry these blessings with us and be blessed. And may we do so in all that we feel, in all that we think, in all that we say, and in all that we do. Amen.